So just to kind of break things up a little bit, I'll be talking to you guys about the design of our new building and some pilots that are taking place that have launched as a result. And Emily will go through the research, the methods that were used to get to the space that we designed for our Agile programming team called On Demand. So this is a picture of our 9 buildings on campus and a lot of words, but I think it's really important for you guys to understand the journey that we went through. SAP, some of you may know, is a 40-year-old company that has strong German cultural roots. It is the backbone of other major companies globally. So we had very stringent guidelines. We provided space at a 1-to-1 ratio. We provided offices for everyone, VP and above. We provided your traditional conference room space. So we had to go through a completely different method to create a building for folks who wanted to work in a very different way. And what this ended up doing is actually disrupting an entire campus. We were going to have to, over a year and a half's time, move about 1,800 people, just kind of shuffle everybody on campus so that we could do a tenant improvement and renovate 3 existing occupied buildings. And so we had to have a clear vision for our campus, what we wanted it to be. And we also had to get real honest with ourselves and finally listen to the developers, because over the past 7 years, we had opened 5 other buildings, and we did it in a very traditional way. We had our planners go out and meet with the managers and program the space. How many cubes do you need? How many offices? What kind of project space do you need? And then we hired wonderful designers that designed us some really beautiful buildings. But we never got really honest with ourselves and went back to the developers and saying, are these buildings really supporting the way that you work? And with Agile and design thinking methodologies being used, what ended up happening is these developers started to come to us and say, the cube farms aren't working for us. We can't work like this. The on-demand team in particular was a completely new market for SAP. They wanted to have a startup mentality. They wanted to have very flexible and fluid space, and they needed to be able to react quickly. So that's really what got us to having all of these conversations. And it's a huge opportunity and a huge impact on our campus. So Emily's going to talk through some of the methods that we used.
Great. So On Demand was sort of the first domino in this campus strategy. So it was a new business unit. It was cloud computing. It was software as a service. There were a lot of changes going on. In a way, it's sort of the inverse of the Facebook. So Facebook is sort of like, how do we grow old and how do we get comfortable with that? This was sort of like, how do we launch a startup within a larger organization? So this is sort of about those different tensions in terms of creating this new business unit. And then, as I said, it was also the first domino, because pulling all the people from different locations and putting them all in one building left the space for the further moves. So in terms of methodology, we did do research. We did talk to developers. We actually even asked developers to help design their space. But it was actually a pretty quick process. This all happened from sort of the first day of meeting them to beginning construction and finalizing design in about 4 to 6 months. So there, you know, if folks sort of think like, how much patience do we have, it can actually go very quickly.
And then just looking at a plan view of the space, what this space really did for us is got all of our employees in team rooms along the perimeter of the building. Everyone had a lot of access to natural light. It was very flexible space. Our enclosed collaboration space was in the interior of the building. And what we ended up with was a space that was very flexible, a space that acted as a sponge, and people had to learn that their workplace was no longer just their individual cube, their individual space. They worked in a building, because we implemented all of those things that you heard O&A talk about. They talked about phone booths and collaboration rooms and small meeting size rooms for 2 people as opposed to 12 people. And when you do that, you get more and more of a variety of space types. So people really learned how to work in a building and not just in their workstation.
So we have 5 lessons learned, sort of 5 tenets that we used when we developed this project. The first is about borrowing Agile tools from the client group. So we recognized that this was a huge shift in working in an Agile method, and we actually were sort of inspired by it and interested by it. So our design process incorporated Agile tools. So just a really simple example of that is a user story So this is something that software teams use when they're first developing the requirements for their software. And the thing about the user story is sort of like, what's the story that the user would eventually tell of the software? And what I think is interesting about this is they say the what, not the how. So tell us the what. I need to be able to connect with my colleagues, not the how. I need a meeting room. I need a desk. So we did this in multiple, basically every meeting we had. We definitely could have used measures of success or some other tool, but this was something that the developers knew. And so after doing this with about 60% of the population, we really honed it down into themes. And the interesting thing here too is that those themes and colors are themes that the leadership had talked to us about. Information flow, fun working together, collaboration, sort of these big ticket items. The gray were these minor themes that came out that actually hadn't come from leadership at all, or leadership hadn't talked about, which was about accommodation for privacy. As somebody said, at the end of the day, I have to sit down and code at some point. So this enabled us to really sort of push back and really understand that we needed to not overcorrect for the shift. The second principle is about questioning current design biases. So here's where I show a slide that's sort of a little bit unflattering, but bear with me because I'm trying to be honest. So the first sort of tack at observations, we were looking at the individual level, so we were tracking individuals. And what we came up with was that their work style was mobile, so there they are looking for a space to sit on demand. It was collaborative, so there's 3 people brainstorming, and it was highly varied. So there's actually a guy that's probably going to sit at his desk for about 10 hours that day, and he might get 1 call. The thing about this is that that's really not that enlightening. Why do research if you're going to come up with a finding that probably anybody would say about their population? So we ended up getting a little bit more quantitative about it, and we took some key measures around those aspects. So what is the ratio of cell phone calls to landline calls? Are people actually needing a desk phone? You know, how many different spaces are they occupying? Really, how are they moving through the space? And when we did this, what we found was there was actually like a really clear breaking point between 2 different populations. And it really wasn't to solve at the individual level or study at the individual level. It was that there were basically 2 kinds of teams. There's the ideation team, and then there's the execution team. So this probably sounds familiar to most software companies. It was just really accelerated there. So ideation is 5 people. It's a product manager. It's a knowledge management. They're brainstorming. They're using Post-its. They're going really quickly. At some point, their idea either gets the green light or it doesn't. If it gets the green light, it splits up into much smaller teams that work at a different pace, that guy that's at the computer all day. So we knew that we had to solve for these 2 different kinds of teams.
So here are just some photos of the space of the pod areas, and these pods expand and contract between 6 and 12 people, easily work within them. The equipment that we provided was a sit-stand desk, because most of the developers are at their workstation most of the time. So give them some variety in their work environment. We also put large LCDs in the space, because this actually became the core Scrum team. So if there's 10 people on a Scrum team, they're all sitting in this space, they're having their stand-up meeting in there, they're having any other conversation they need to have, they're all working on the same topic. So while it's very open and you're all sitting very close together, you're actually in an enclosed room that can shrink or grow depending on the needs of the team. So you're not hearing a whole bunch of other side conversations. The entire building is very open and collaborative. You can easily look into other rooms to see where other people are. But some of the tools we provided are lots of whiteboard space, because they are whiteboarding a lot, they're collaborating a lot. What you won't see in this space is desk phones, because people do need to work, and it's very distracting if someone's having a phone conversation where you're not hearing the other side of the conversation, as opposed to if you're listening to 2 people talk and you can hear the whole topic and you can actually maybe contribute or learn something. So what this team did, they're cloud computing, they're building software that may actually be on an iPad. So this team now has mobile phones, which was actually a shift for development community. They are working 12 hours a day, 14 hours a day. When they go home, they don't want to be bothered. It was actually, there was a little bit of resistance to shift to a cell phone. What we did, though, is provided 22 phone booths throughout the space. And what that did was gave them the place to go and have a conversation so that they're not on a cell phone for a 2-hour conference call if that was what they needed to do that day. But they were the right size that the managers could then go in and have their one-on-one meetings in a comfortable enough space, comfortable enough for 2 people, but not comfortable enough for someone to try and take it over as their private office. So that was a really key implementation. We, of course, have a lot of collaboration, multi-purpose areas where people can drop in, visitors can just pop down. The building as a whole has about 200 people assigned to it. It could absorb about 350 people if it needed to. So many seats are in this space. And the multi-purpose area had to be very flexible. At any moment, it could be a 60-person theater-style meeting, and then, you know, the end part of the day, it's reconfigured for a design thinking workshop. So, and they do all of that design. They do all of their own moves now. They let us know, oh, this person's changed teams and they're moving to that room, and then they wheel their desk and their pedestal with them. These are examples of some quiet spaces, the phone rooms, and as well as what the team termed coding caves. These were really important when we started this journey, because engineers said, you know, if I have to sit with 10 other people, where am I going to go to do my heads down work when I need to focus and I need quiet? So they set up the protocols with Emily and team's help. No cell phones, no talking. This is where we go when we want to go heads down. And guess what? 6 months later, they're not using these spaces. All but one of them have been converted to project rooms, but it was really important in the beginning for us to be able to say, we're providing this space for you. But they've all gotten into a rhythm in their team rooms. They've all figured out what time of day they have their stand-up meeting, and they have their conversations. They've all figured out when they all go quiet at the same time. So these rooms aren't really needed. So it was a really interesting learning from the space.
Great. So the third point is about challenging the design team to go beyond user research to co-creation. So this is about sort of, if user research is, you ask them questions and you listen to them, and then you design and you come back to them and say, is this what you meant? Co-creation actually enlisting the users of the space and creating solutions. And don't get me wrong, there's this place for designers, and designers were involved, and Real Grubman did a wonderful job. But we really had specific aspects where we pulled people that were UX, they had design backgrounds, they just happened to work as developers, and we had basically a charrette, and we gave them specific problems to solve. So this is an example of sort of solving the community aspect, and you know, is it a team wall where you know where all the teams are sitting? Is it sort of like a live feed to another location? Is it live feed to Waldorf in the cafeteria? And then this engineering graph, how big of an impact would it have, and how hard would it be to implement? This was another thing of designing furniture configurations based on usage scenarios, so that, you know, it's not enough just to put wheels on a piece of furniture and expect that people will move it. So beyond giving them cell phones and all of Raquel's work on the technology that enabled that, but also helping them sort of solve through and giving them scale drawings on how furniture might be configured. So we showed the pods, so this is just a couple more pictures of how teams were rearranging them when they were first moving in. And then the important point, people always say, sort of, what did the executives do? The executives went into an open area at sort of the end of the building. That's where they sit on the left. They do have a meeting room nearby. In many ways, their space was kind of inferior to what the rest of the teams were getting. And it just shows how committed the business unit was to not only the space, but also the potential for the business. So under design and evaluate results. So Raquel's team was really conscious all the time that this was a pilot, which isn't just a way to sort of get something different through really quickly. It was really about building it to 60% or 70% and saving time and resources to come back and evaluate. So we started the post-occupancy evaluation on Friday at 3 p.m. So this is hot off the presses. It's not all good, as you might imagine. There's work to be done there, but these were sort of the first responses, and just wanted to show that in certain areas that we really were specific about, community, energy, buzz, excitement, we really are achieving there and felt good about that. But this is sort of like one glance, which is what do the employees think about it? But we also want to think about, because we had that original slide that showed sort of on demand within SAP, within the market, we also want to think about those communities when we say, was this project successful? So The business unit has been published in Forbes and CIO, and it's sort of like, the article is about the shift to cloud. The space provides a picture, but it's really about announcing to the marketplace how they're changing who they are. And then finally, how has this project resonated within the community? So we partnered with Carbon 5 to do sort of an all-day think tank around Agile spaces and what are Agile spaces like, and we handpicked a group of people that participated, many of whom are in the room, and Amy Kwok, who helped produce the document from this, but really understanding sort of, you know, many companies are doing Agile in different ways. They would say sort of, you know, they're borrowing some things but not others. So what does that mean for this space? What's the typology?
And we did mention this was a pilot. This actually, because these development teams are traditionally global teams, they have people in other locations, they hear about what we're doing locally in Palo Alto, and they want to do it in Waldorf and Bangalore and all over the world. So we do have a few other projects that are underway. We're working with a design firm and DEGW on a space in Montreal, and this is a development community that will actually, for the first time at SAP, be completely unassigned space, which is really exciting because it's challenging these folks to work in a different way and adopt different methodologies and take things to the next level. So it's a great space, and that people will be moving into in just a few months' time. Locally here, we also have a small team they've called themselves App House. They're creating applications. They have about a 90-day turnaround time. So they actually took 25 people off campus, created a very flexible space that has launched into other parts of the globe. The photo on the right is Dublin, Ireland. So they've gone from about 25 folks to 80 folks in Ireland, sitting in the same very flexible, open environment, which is with no offices, which is very much not what SAP traditionally does in their workspace. And that has all come full circle back to Palo Alto, and now those 3 buildings that we're renovating will be completely flexible and an open floor plan for about 500 employees. So it is something that has just launched. It's going global within the company, and it's really exciting. And that's it. Thank you.